Imagine you have a huge decision to make. Should you take the job? Marry the person? Go to war? And instead of agonizing over it, you walk down to the temple, ask a giant stone statue of a god, and watch as the statue physically lurches forward to give you its answer. That actually happened. In ancient Egypt, that was a normal, respectable way to make a decision. Pharaohs used it to plan military campaigns. Ordinary people used it to settle lawsuits. The statue of the god would be carried out, a question would be put to it, and the god would answer by moving. The ancient Egyptians were obsessed with knowing the future, and they didn't treat it as a silly superstition off in the corner of life. They built it into the machinery of the entire state. They had a national calendar that told you which days were cursed. They had dream manuals. They read omens in the sky, in animals, in your own sneezes. They had professional fortune tellers and talking statues, and a god of fate that decided how long you would live before you were even born. So how did they actually do it? How do you predict the future with no science, no data, no idea what's really coming? The answer is a wild mix of clever observation, total nonsense, and a few methods that, be honest, you basically still use today. Let's look into the future, Egyptian style. Let's start with the talking statues, because they're the strangest and the most powerful. These were the oracles, and they were a serious institution. On festival days, priests would lift the statue of a god onto a sacred boat called a bark and carry it out of the temple on their shoulders, parading it through the crowd. And while it was out, people could approach and ask it questions. Sometimes the questions were written on bits of pottery, one version saying yes, another saying no, placed in God's path. Sometimes a list of names was read aloud, and the god would answer by causing the heavy statue to move, dipping forward for yes, drawing back for no, or lurching toward the correct option as the priests carried it. Now, were the priests underneath nudging it? Almost certainly, yes. Come on. But here's the thing. That doesn't mean it was a cynical con. The priests genuinely believed they were instruments of the god's will, that the god worked through their bodies to deliver the verdict. And the people believed it absolutely. These oracle decisions were treated as legally binding. We have records of real disputes, property arguments, accusations of theft, settled by asking a statue, and everyone accepting the result. A god had spoken. Case closed. Imagine resolving a courtroom case today by wheeling out a statue and seeing which way it tipped. In Egypt, that was the Supreme Court. And this wasn't just for peasants and petty squabbles. Pharaohs consulted oracles to legitimize their right to rule, to choose officials, even to guide war. The future, as told by a god through a wobbling statue, could literally steer the course of the kingdom. Next, let's talk about the calendar, because this might be the most relatable one of all. The Egyptians believed that some days were simply lucky, and others were dangerous, even deadly, and they wrote it all down. There survives an actual ancient Egyptian calendar of lucky and unlucky days. For each day of the year, it gave a rating, favorable or unfavorable, and often a reason drawn from mythology. A day might be marked dangerous because, according to legend, it was the day two gods went to war, or the day a god was injured. And the warnings could get incredibly specific. On a bad day, the advice might be, do not go outside, do not eat fish today, do not light a fire, do not travel by boat, do not start any work. One day might be so cursed that the instruction was essentially, whoever is born today will die in a particular way, and whatever you do nothing important. People actually planned their lives around this. You might delay a journey, postpone a business deal, or stay home entirely because the calendar said today was a day of misfortune. Think about that for a second. And then think about the person today who won't make a big move on a Friday the 13th, or who checks their horoscope before a date. or who has a bad feeling about a certain day. We never stopped doing this. The Egyptians just had the official, government-issued version 3,000 years ago. Then there were dreams. The Egyptians were convinced that dreams were messages, windows into the future sent by the gods or the dead. So naturally, they wrote a manual for decoding them. We have an ancient Egyptian dream book, a scroll that lists dream after dream and tells you whether it's a good omen or a bad one, and what it predicts. The format is wonderfully consistent. If a man sees himself in a dream doing such and such, good or bad, followed by the meaning. And the interpretations are a glorious mix of logical and completely bizarre. Seeing yourself looking out a window? Good. It means your prayer has been heard. Dreaming of something white or of plentiful food often meant good fortune. But seeing your own face in a mirror could be bad news, a sign of a second wife coming. Drinking warm beer in a dream? Bad omen. Suffering is on the way. Some of them feel like the ancient ancestor of every "What does my dream mean?" website you've ever drowsily typed into your phone at 2 in the morning. The Egyptians beat you to it by 3,000 years, and they were just as confident about it as the internet is. And it didn't stop at dreams. The Egyptians read omens in absolutely everything. The world to them was constantly sending signals, if you only knew how to read them.
They watched the sky.
The movement of the stars and planets, the rising of certain constellations, eclipses, all of it could carry meaning about what was to come, especially for the king and the kingdom. They watched animals. The behavior of certain creatures could be a sign. The annual flooding of the Nile itself was the ultimate omen, measured carefully every year because the height of the flood predicted whether the coming year would bring abundance or famine. That one, at least, was real forecasting. Water level genuinely predicted the harvest. And then they got delightfully specific about the human body. There were lists of omens drawn from the most ordinary things. If your ear rings, it means something. If your eye twitches, it means something. And the best one, they believed a sneeze or other involuntary little body events could be signs. Your body, in other words, was constantly leaking little predictions about your fate, and a trained person could interpret them. Honestly, the next time someone says "bless you" when you sneeze, you can tell them you're just receiving an ancient Egyptian omen. Underneath all of these methods sat a deeper belief, that your fate was, to a large degree, already set. The Egyptians had gods specifically connected to destiny and fortune. There was a concept of a predetermined lifespan and fate assigned to you, and goddesses believed to appear at a child's birth to foretell how that child's life would unfold and even how they would die. The idea that the length and shape of your life was written from the start was woven right into their worldview. Predicting the future, then, wasn't about changing it. It was about reading a script that had, in some sense, already been written. But, and this is important, the Egyptians weren't fatalists who just gave up. This is the clever part. They believed that if you could see misfortune coming, you could often protect yourself against it with magic. If the calendar warned that today was dangerous, you stayed in and performed protective rituals. If a dream predicted something bad, there were spells to cancel the omen and wash the bad luck away before it could come true. If you knew a demon might attack, you wore an amulet. Knowing the future wasn't the end of the story. It was an early warning system. Forecast the danger, then defend against it. It's not so different from checking the weather and grabbing an umbrella, except their forecast came from a dream book, and their umbrella was a magic spell. So step back and take in the whole strange, sprawling system. Talking statues that settled lawsuits, a national calendar of cursed days, a manual for decoding dreams, omens in the stars, the animals, the river, and your own twitching eye, goddesses who wrote your fate at birth, and a whole toolkit of magic to dodge the bad news once you'd seen it coming. The Egyptians built an entire apparatus, part religion, part bureaucracy, part wishful thinking, devoted to one of the deepest human cravings there is, the desire to know what happens next. And it's easy to feel superior about it. No statue actually moves on its own. No dream really predicts a second wife. The calendar didn't know anything. But before you laugh too hard, look at yourself. We read horoscopes. We check our star signs before a first date. We knock on wood, cross our fingers, avoid walking under ladders, and get a funny feeling about certain days. We pay people to read our palms and our tarot cards and our birth charts. Billions of dollars flow every year toward telling people what's coming. The need hasn't faded one bit. We are exactly as desperate to know the future as the Egyptians were. We've just swapped the wobbling statue for an app. Because underneath all of it, ancient and modern, is the same simple, very human fear. Tomorrow is dark, and we can't see into it. We don't know what's coming, the good or the bad, the love or the loss. The day everything changes. And that uncertainty is almost unbearable. So we reach for anything that promises to pull back the curtain, even just a little. The Egyptians reach for the stars and the statues and the dreams. You reach for your horoscope. 3,000 years apart, both of you are really asking the very same question, into the very same darkness. Please, just tell me it's going to be okay.